And welcome to the Metro Inner Development Assessment Panel for Wednesday, the 8th of April. Declare the meeting open at 9:35 a.m. And I acknowledge we are hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia and pay respects to elders past and present and the ongoing connection between people, land, waters and community. The meeting will be run in accordance with the DAP Standing Orders, DAP Regulations 2011. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the DAP website. Panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. I'll now introduce the panel members for today. My name is Karen Hyde. I'm the presiding member. To my right, I have Dale Page, our deputy presiding member. To my left, John Syme, our specialist member. Online for Part B for the City of Stirling, we have Councillor Suzanne Migdal and Councillor Rob Hubbard. And later for Part C and in the room, we have for City of Perth, we have Councillor Raj Doshi and Councillor Chris Patton. Item 2, apologies from Councillor Liam Gobbett, Local Government DAP member for the City of Perth. Item 3, noting of minutes. The panel notes minutes of previous meetings are available on the DAP website. We'll now move to Part B of our agenda for the City of Stirling. And first, I'd like to seek a declaration of due consideration. Panel members need to have considered all the documentation contained within Part B of the agenda and Part B related information. Please confirm by show of hands that members have duly considered all information. Thank you. That's unanimous. Next, item 2, disclosures of interest. Could I please check with our local government DAP members, Councillor Migdal and Councillor Pappard, has this application been before you at a briefing or a meeting?
No.
No. Okay, lovely. Thank you. Were there any other disclosures of interest? No? Okay. Moving ahead then to the item before us, and we have item 3.1, lots 43 and 44, numbers 24 and 26, Brighton Road, Scarborough, for mixed-use development. We have 3 presenters on this item today, all for the applicant. So we'll take them in order, and if panel members are happy, given that they're all the applicant, we'll hear from all of those 3 presenters, and then we'll open up for questions. Councillor Pappard, you've got your hand up, I think, have you? No? Is that just on? That's us. That's us. Don't worry. Don't worry. Okay, so first we have Alice Ardit from Scanlon Architects presenting in support of the application. And you have a PowerPoint. It's not been... Spring. It'll be brought up. We'll just get that up. Yeah. And then when you want to move from one slide to the next, just ask Kristen. I think it's probably easier because sometimes it's a bit of delayed reaction with the...
Okay, with this. Okay.
I've given all the presenters a designated 3-minute time frame. So please try and stick to that with the salient points. Thank you.
Thank you.
So when you're ready, Alice.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to present today. This application relates to the proposed mixed-use development at 2426 Brighton Road, Scarborough. Next. The proposal comprises 67 dwellings across 9 stories, including a mix of apartment and townhouse-style units, a ground floor gym, basement parking, communal open space, and landscaping. The application has been reviewed by the design review panel on 2 occasions and refined through ongoing discussion with the City of Stirling. The proposal is recommended for approval subject to condition. The key planning considerations include land use, build form, height, and setbacks. Next, please. The proposed height slightly exceeds the 29-meter base height, with additional height limited to lift overruns and roof elements. It is not noticeable from the street, fits comfortably within the existing 8 to 9-story context, and has no adverse impact on neighboring properties. In terms of land use, multiple dwellings are a preferred use. Next, please. And the gym is contemplated use within the Beach Road precinct. The city supports this as activate the ground floor and enhance the streetscape. Next. The development also provides a strong landscaping outcome with communal open space, next please, across multiple levels, contributing positively to the streetscape and residential amenity. In relation to setbacks, the tower elements comply with 10-meter setbacks with minor level 3 variation limited to open communal space and landscaping. This area remained largely unenclosed with only small standalone non-habitable element integrated into the design, resulting in minimal book and no overlooking or privacy impact. Next, please. Screening has been provided where necessary, and podium setback, despite not being required, next please, further improve the interface with adjoining properties. Next, please. We are generally supportive of the condition, please, which relate to detailed design and can be addressed at building permit stage. However, next please, the dwelling mix has been updated to increase one-bedroom unit and achieve housing diversity. The requirement to deliver affordable housing introduces significant financial impact in the current environment. Given this, and the project existing contribution, we respectfully request the panel reconsider this condition. Aside from that, the next one. Thanks. Aside from that, we are comfortable working with the city to address all remaining conditions. We respectfully request the panel support the officer recommendation for approval.
Very much. Next speaker is Andra Biondi from Urbanista, speaking in support of the application. Thank you. When you're ready, Andra.
Thank you, Preside.
You didn't need the PowerPoint?
No.
Okay.
Thank you. Good. Good morning, members, and to those online. Thank you for the opportunity to present. So obviously I'm appearing here today as the applicant and in strong support of the officer's recommendation. And I just wanted to thank the city's officers for their work and their assistance in the assessment of this application. So I just trust that the panel members have read our deputation, and I thought I'd just take the opportunity to jump specifically to condition 29. That's a little bit of a concern for us. So we've obviously undergone a really strong RFI process with the city, and we've worked very closely with the city's DRP to achieve an outcome that is, not only meeting the elements of the planning framework, but it's really going to activate this street and provide a strong housing outcome, which we do desperately need, obviously, in this area, but not across the Perth metropolitan area as well. So just a little bit of background. The city did ask us to improve our dwelling mix, which we did. So we've got about 20%, I think, of one-bedroom dwellings. And we're of the strong view that this satisfies that intent to provide affordable housing. Just noting as well that the policy for affordable housing, so I think it's development policy number 9, it talks about affordable and diverse housing, and there are 4 objectives in this policy. And one of those objectives states to assist the authority, so the formerly the MRA, in achieving its target of 10 to 15% affordable dwelling across the Scarborough redevelopment area. So we certainly acknowledge that that is an objective of the policy framework, but our view very much is that the one-bedroom dwellings do satisfy that, and we've gone above and beyond to meet that. So as a result of that, we are requesting that that condition 29 be deleted, which talks about providing affordable housing units at construction cost to the MRA. And just to be very frank with the panel members about this, it does impact the economic feasibility of this development. And as you can appreciate, as we do multiple dwelling developments, they can become quite complex from a feasibility perspective. And we're really trying to address all of those elements and that the design review panel have asked us for. So in this instance, we would just ask that discretion be applied in terms of the reasonableness of that. We'd really like to see this development off the ground in its current form. Without that condition, it is economically viable for our client. So thank you for that.
Thank you. The next speaker is Amanda Wilson from QS Developments in support of the application.
Morning, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to speak. Just taking on board and trying to explain my role within QS Developments is the financial modelling for the project, and the ability for us to actually deliver on the affordability component would be the most difficult component of any any condition that we have on this project. We'd have to the issue that and the things that have been happening in the market space at the moment means that any product, even at cost price, sort of doesn't tick the parameters that our affordable housing providers can afford to actually pay for the project, and then it becomes a viability issue for us as a developer, and the financial modelling and the LVRs and the project returns are constrained by the conditions of the site itself, as well as the yield mix. We've been able to fit within the parameters of the bulk and mass of the building. So the thing I did want to add on to it as well is when we consider affordability, it's also the fact that the city's been very supportive and concise and direct with their directions during this process that we've gone through. So we've been able to modify product, move quickly, and then the time value of money has actually played an important role in this. So as a financial model, the project itself would suffer almost, the affordability requirement would make it a non-viable project for our funders and our backers and our equity partners. So that's why we're requesting that condition be amended or changed. I think.
Thank you very much. I'll now invite our members to ask questions. I'll start with our members online first. Councillor Migdal, did you have any questions of these presenters?
Thank you, Chair. I think to the second and third presenter, I would probably just ask, have they been faced with a condition like condition 29 previously in any developments that they have done?
Yeah, you go.
Thank you, Councillor McDowell, for the question. So there was a previous approval of the site. The yield was a lot greater than 67 dwellings. So I'm not sure, did we have that condition, Armando, as part of that one previously?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, but we were seeing in that instance, what's a little bit different here is that we were seeing there was greater height here. It was more, I guess, justifiable in terms of the overall dwelling mix and how that discretion was applied. Councillor Migdale was more appropriate, I think, for that development. This development's a lot more scaled back. It's a lot more nuanced, and it's feasible for where we're at in terms of the market. So there is that differentiation. I don't know if you want to add on.
The only thing I would add on is that the economies of scale play a very big role in this. If you can spread the cost out over 117 apartments, which was the previous scheme, and also plus the hotel and the financial modelling there, made it easier to adopt the affordable model and cut the cake in a certain way that made affordable product a more deliverable outcome. At the moment, it seems that this is sort of like it's complicated and convoluted in that it's a smaller project, and we're trying to increase the affordability, but then where the market is at the moment with a construction price of in the order of 740,000 a dwelling, to then try and create an affordable product by discounting and dropping price, and trying to find an operator who would take on the financial modelling for themselves to spend that quantum to put a client into the project where they probably. I've had this conversation with a number of accommodation providers who are finding it's easier for them to put their clients or their participants in different locations where it's more financially appropriate for them. It's a sledgehammer trying to deliver what's a nuanced outcome.
Thank you. Does that answer the question, Councillor?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Did you have other questions, Councillor?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Papard, did you have questions of the presenters?
Yes, yeah, I will ask a question, and it relates to condition 29 as well. So if this were to be retained in some modified form, for example, as I don't know, a cash in lieu contribution or a stage delivery. Now, would this project still be unviable in the view of the members there?
I'm not sure a cash in lieu without a dollar value attached to it. I think the intent of providing affordable housing is something that everybody is trying to achieve. Financial modelling, where I'm not sure where the funds would go, what the funds would be used for, and how they would actually achieve affordability. I think the project isn't. It can't be like a test case or let's see it, suck it and see what happens. It's a pretty simple financial model where inputs and the final outcomes, and then there's also what market will spend. So I'd struggle to. Sorry, just one thing, as a developer, we're always keen to achieve affordable housing because the outcome is we get the product out the door and we can move on to the next project. So my concern with this one would be trying to create a condition that's almost by its nature difficult to deliver on. That would be probably the, I don't know if that answers the question, but it's.
Thank you. Andrew, did you wish to add to the answer?
Just want to add from a planning perspective. I think that's important. Obviously, we're here considering a planning application. The role of the planning framework is obviously to create some level of certainty. We understand that there's an affordable component. We've elected or chosen to work with the city in a way that delivers affordability through 1 bedrooms, but still ensures that this makes obviously the development economically viable for our client. So we still feel that we meet that intent of the affordable and diverse housing policy. It's just about how you apply it and the discretion around that. So yeah, in summary, we feel we meet it in that respect by providing more 1 bedroom.
Thank you. Councillor Papa, did you have another question, please?
One on maybe on the height. Were alternative architectural responses explored that maintain design quality while at the same time avoiding the height variation?
Who's wanting to speak to this?
I'll respond to that.
Yes, come forward, please, Laurie, because it's no good speaking from the back row.
Look, during the design, councillor, during the design review sessions that we had, which were quite extensive, we actually explored that because we realised right from up front that one of the things we tried to achieve in this development was to be a more economical and affordable housing. We made the client and ourselves made a conscious decision to go underneath the 29 metres. And we tried desperately to try to make sure we adhere to that because the previous schemes, we understood that, well, I understood that going above the 29 would trigger this as one of the requirements, i.e. the creation of affordable housing in that model where it's offset against community rentals. During the design review, we put that to the panel. They asked the same questions. We could have dropped the building that 450 or 460. It would have meant that the retail spaces and the lobbies and some of the communal areas at the ground floor would have actually could have survived, but they would have gone down to a level which would be unacceptable from a design perspective. So we did try, but I mean, the design review panel actually said to us they'd much rather us keep that height. In fact, during the course of further discussions with the City of Stirling, we were asked to increase the height further. So part of this journey has been, we've been requested and encouraged to keep that ground floor at a higher level, and consequently we couldn't keep the non-habitable lift overruns below that 29 metres.
Thank you. Anything further, councillor?
And on that, what was one of the I'm not sure who it was, mentioned roof elements. What was that in regards to? What's the roof elements?
Now we have the lift overrun, which is 1.2 meter and is set back in, so it will never be visible from street level, and that is where we encroach the most. Roof space is literally the roof on the main tower build, which is the 480 millimeter that Laurie mentioned, because the size is low. And this is roof element, so it's not habitable space, it's not windows, it's literally like the top of the roof of the building.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Panel members in the room, questions of the presenters, Member Page?
Actually, a very simple one, if you don't mind, and it's about condition 3A. That relates to privacy screening, additional privacy screening, and I just wanted to check if the condition is worded quite broadly. I just wanted to check that you are satisfied and understand exactly what is required of you.
Yes, so we address all screening issue, not just for overlooking, but also for planners and tenants. So we are very aware of that. We treated that as part of the plan from the beginning. So the whole area has been addressing differently, which you already.
This is just really confirming what you've already discussed.
It's absolutely has been incorporated in that.
Thank you. Member Syme?
Quick one, Amanda.
Yes.
Have you spoken to communities or anybody about this?
We've spoken to a few providers to get their feedback initially as to whether it's a location they want to be in, and then whether or not they can financially have the capacity to acquire.
And reaction is too much money.
Yeah, well, yeah. They also have a situation where they have to deliver accommodation for their participants, and then bringing they're not comfortable with it, for want of a better word.
So we don't know if there's a purchaser out there.
Not at the moment, there isn't.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other questions of the presenters, then we will refer to the officers at the City of Stirling, and we have Sam Mitchie, Sean Whitland, James Fletcher, Giovanna Lambacca online. We've obviously read all, oh, Giovanna's not there. We've obviously read all of your reports, so no need to summarise those, but were there any opening remarks you wish to make in light of the conversation that you've just heard, or are you happy to go straight to questions? You're on. There you go.
Thank you through the chair. We'll give a brief opening.
Through the chair, the city wishes to thank the applicant for their willingness to work collaboratively with the city, particularly to make changes to design to allow for fundamental on-site waste collection. The proposal involves the redevelopment of 24 and 26 Brighton Road through the demolition of 2 existing single houses.
Right. Can I just stop you? We do, as I said earlier, we don't need you to explain what's in the report because we're quite comfortable with that and we've read it all. So were there any initial responses that you wanted to provide given what you just heard in the question and answer, or are you happy for us just to put questions to you?
Yeah, well, we'll go into, I guess, the sticking point is the condition 29. The city's happy to provide some initial comments, then answer any additional questions that you have after that, if that suits yourselves.
Lovely, thank you.
Yeah, so Development Control Policy 9, as identified by the applicant, requires affordable and diverse housing and was adopted part of the Scarborough framework when it was previously DFWA. The policy seeks to support sustainable communities by delivering a diverse mix of housing types and tenure that improve affordability. The policy targets 10 to 15% affordable housing across the Scarborough redevelopment area by requiring residential and mixed-use developments to include a minimum of 12% as affordable housing. The city's assessment identifies that the 67 apartment mixed-use development is of a size and scale to warrant the requirement for the level of affordable housing. Additionally, outlined within the applicant's planning submission, the proposal identified its capability to provide 12% or 8 dwellings for affordable housing, meeting the 12% requirement. The policy allows for either affordable owner-occupier housing or social housing to satisfy the requirement. Condition 29 is recommended, requiring affordable housing is to be provided in accordance with the Development Policy 9, details of which are to be provided prior to planning condition clearance, i.e. working drawings. Is there any other questions in relation to the condition or the city's assessment of that?
Thank you. Yes, we'll go to members on screen first. Councillor Mingdale, did you have questions of the officers?
No, not at this stage.
Councillor Papard, did you have questions of the officers? No?
No,
Okay.
not at the moment, no.
Members in the room, Member Syme.
Yes, your development contribution, your development policy 9 also says as a provision which gives considerable discretion to a decision maker regarding this, specifically to offset any perceived loss of profit associated with the perceived, not demonstrated loss of profit associated with the requirement, where it's considered by the authority the variation will not result in an inappropriate built form. Can you tell me whether you considered that discretion, and why do you think that in this case your view is that the panel should not apply that level of discretion?
So the city's assessment of the built form, I guess, concluded that the overall built form met the requirements. So the city didn't go through that process, so to speak. Its assessment of the affordable housing component aligned with, I guess, the broader framework and other developments of this scale and nature. Additionally, as noted within the applicant's report, identified that the 12% or 8 dwellings was capable of the affordable housing. So that concluded that the city identified that there was a need for it and there is a warrant to, I guess, apply it as a condition.
You have a follow-up?
What about the evidence that we received today that there may not actually be a purchaser for this in the social housing environment?
So the city hasn't received that information from the applicant at this point in time. However, the city has been engaged by a number of other applicants within the area that have and are currently clearing the similar condition, that have put forward both respondents that are open to the affordable owner-occupier method, so to speak, and their ability to work through that condition.
Thank you.
Paige, questions?
Yeah, I'm going to start with a follow-up on condition 29, and then I have a few other questions. So can we just park what you said about the fact that the applicant included the issue of affordable housing in their submission? I don't really think that's enough of a reason to inquire it, but so can we just park that? You just stated that the overall met the requirements. Now, when I read this report, it looks like the overall build form only just exceeds the base requirement. So I'd like you to specifically comment on the need for the condition, given the reduced scale of the proposal, and whether or not there's actually a nexus behind that very minor height variation in affordable housing. What are you landing on? What is it that you feel generates the need? You said it does generate the need. I want to explore that a little bit more, please.
Yeah, so the scale of the development in terms of the 67 apartment mixed-use development is what the city, I guess, undertook that assessment on. The city's responsible authority report identifies that the application hasn't demonstrated the ability to go that additional height requirement. So it's acknowledged that that's not the rationale as to why the affordable housing is required. It's done its assessment and concludes that the built form is consistent with the overall objectives. The affordable housing requirement is born from Development Control Policy 9, which identifies a development of this scale and nature being the mixed-use development, 67 apartments would warrant the requirement for an affordable housing component of the 12%.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to some other conditions, if you don't mind, and I'll take you to condition 4. Are you comfortable that the wording of condition 4 relates to colours, materials, and finishes, provides adequate flexibility to allow changes to those colours, materials, and finishes without the need for further planning approval at some time in the future, if required, because of maintenance or other renewal works to the buildings?
Yes, the city is satisfied to the satisfaction of the city, allows flexibility for changes to colours, materials, as such that wouldn't propose any variation to the planning framework, that it could be dealt with through a build permit or subsequent approval without requiring an amended DA.
Thank you. And then I'm looking at condition 12 and 13. So is condition 12 necessary, given the wording of condition 13, or do you feel both are necessary to ensure ongoing compliance with the noise management plan once occupied?
Through the chair, the city believes that those two conditions are necessary. One is to demonstrate the recommendations of the of the noise management, and the second being condition 13 is required to demonstrate that those get carried through into the building permit documentation at certification stage, as I understand it.
The other important thing to note is the ground floor tenancy has been identified for a gym, and there is a requirement for both conditions, as there may be a requirement for additional noise attenuation in relation to the conflict between a gymnasium or a commercial gym and residential on the upper floors.
Thank you. I'm looking at condition 25, and that condition talks about where a storeroom is solely accessible through an adjacent car bay. The storeroom and the car bay will be assigned to the same dwelling. At which point would you clear condition 25?
So that would be identified at the build permit stage. That's to, I guess, ensure that any storerooms that are blocked by a car parking are attributed to that, so that you don't have the circumstances where Unit 5 is parked in front of storeroom 10 and they can't get to the storeroom. So it's just a consistent condition that the city recommends to ensure that that is not a conflict at a future time.
Okay, so you want the building plans to show the allocation of storerooms and bays. It's at that point that you'll clear this condition?
Through the chair, that's an option. Alternatively, when the city undertakes an occupancy permit inspection, we also verify those measures upon inspection.
Okay, all right. And then just a very minor thing, there's duplication of the wording with the following modifications in condition 32 relating to waste management. Are you happy for us to deal with that or delete that administratively?
Through the chair, yes, we are.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Could I just go back to condition 29 and policy 9, which obviously does relate to affordable and diverse housing. I've heard your arguments around affordable, but obviously the policy covers affordable and diverse. Now, the applicant is saying that by virtue of providing a number of single bedroom dwellings or apartments, they're actually covering off on the diversity, and by virtue of the fact that they're obviously a smaller scale, they're also providing a more affordable product in the context of this scheme. So could I please have your comments on how you're applying that policy and whether diversity can actually meet the requirements of the policy without necessarily having to stipulate affordability in the type way that you have previously?
Yeah, through the chair, the policy identifies both affordable and diversity dwelling mix as part of the requirements. So you can't fulfil one without considering the other. I'm not saying that you have to comply with both or provide both, but it's the city's assessment that the affordable housing component hasn't been adequately addressed without the condition being imposed. The city acknowledges that the single bedroom dwelling diversity does comply with the requirements, and it's something that we worked with the applicant with through the DA process, through the DAP process. The actual affordability process, without, I guess, undertaking that assessment of how it satisfies that requirement, the city couldn't be satisfied that that would not be required.
Okay, so I thought I heard you say just then that you didn't necessarily need to cover both affordable and diverse, and yet I think then you followed up with saying that you did need to. Now this is a policy. Is affordability mandated in the city scheme?
No, so through the chair, so the policy is only attributed to the Scarborough framework itself. Obviously Scarborough was previously under the MRA and come with its own policy suite that was adopted as part of the city's framework. Just to clarify in relation to the comments about, I guess, like you said, it is a policy, so it is a due regard document. Whilst you don't have to satisfy both requirements, through the objectives assessment, the city would have to be confident that that area of discretion has been applied. Based on the proposal, without the condition, the city wouldn't be satisfied that affordable housing has been adequately addressed within this development proposal.
Thank you. I'll leave that there. Are there any other questions of the officers at this point before we proceed with the item? No? Okay, thank you for that. We will refer to the item before us, and we have a responsible authority report which recommends that we approve this development for a number of conditions, with a number of conditions and advice notes. So I'm seeking a mover for that, please, in the first instance. Councillor Migdell moves. Is there a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Packard seconds. Councillor Migdell as mover, would you like to speak to the motion? Councillor Migdell just disappeared from our screen, so we'll just wait until we get her back again. There you are.
Sorry about that. A few technical difficulties here, and I was trying to let you know that I'm happy to move the item, though I want to request removal of condition 3A and 29.
Okay, so we can take those as amendments.
Okay.
Migdell. So
Yes.
did you want to speak to the motion and then propose those amendments, or would you like just to propose those amendments one at a time?
I think the rest would be fluff, so I think we should move straight to the amendments, okay?
Yeah, that, yes.
Yes.
We're doing business, aren't we? So
Yes.
your amendments were 3A. And you
Yes.
wanted to delete 3A, was that right?
Yes.
Okay, so condition 3A deleted as amendment 1. Is there a seconder for that, please? Councillor Pappard. Okay, would you like to speak to amendment 1? Councillor.
Yes, sure. Just to say, I guess that, you know, when you're looking at being within a few hundred meters of the ocean, I don't know, I can't see any reason for sensitivity. In other words, there's no school next door. It's not bordering on a school, and it could potentially impede on a particular view at a particular angle. And I just can't see why it is necessary, being across other developments in very close proximity that do not have screening at what would be the same height. I can't see why it would be necessary. So I just think it should be removed.
Councillor Pappard has seconded to amendment 1. Did you wish to speak to that?
No, I won't speak to that, but I do concur with the comments of Councillor Migdell and leave it at that.
Okay, any other speakers on amendment 1? Let's put amendment 1 to the vote. Those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Councillor Migdell, back to you now. You had amendment 2, which was to delete condition 29. And the corresponding advice note 17.
Yes, correct.
17.
It's a subset of.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
17 for. Yeah, 17.
Yeah, thank you. Now, is that seconded? Oh, what's the seconders? Member Symes seconds that. Councillor Migdell, would you like to speak to that?
Happy to speak to that. I mean, I think, you know, it's being across all of the information that we are presented. Obviously, we are in the middle of a massive housing shortage, and I commend the applicant on putting forward an application which will assist with the extreme shortage of one-bedroom apartments, which unbelievably to me, by today's standards, fall into affordable housing in any case, with, you know, it's just a bonus that they happen to be a few hundred meters from the ocean. But I think that on balance, we really need to understand how challenging it is for those that are partaking in development in our fair state today, with all of the rules and regulations that they face and the cost of building today, it is certainly not an industry for the faint-hearted. And I think that there is a massive shortage in these homes, which may well appeal to first home buyers and across the entire market, including downsizers locally as well. I don't think we should have the developer be punching in the dark or with one hand tied behind their back. Fair play to them. They need to ensure that the project is viable, and I respect that. Without it being viable at the end of the day, they may not continue to supply housing, and we've got to recognise that. And there, you know, within the state government, there are areas that are solely responsible. I'm not going to get into it too deeply, but I do believe that affordable and social housing should not fall only on residential developers. We should look at all development, commercial and otherwise, and potentially consider having a fund to offset the cost of that. But we are not going to solve that today. That really, you know, on the fly and trying to, you know, here, put this one home in with the 10,000 shortfall. We're not going to solve that today, but what we can do today is ensure highest and best outcomes, both for those who require houses and for the applicant to continue doing good work. On balance, this is a great development and I support it.
Thank you very much. Member Simon seconded to Amendment 2.
Look, I totally agree with all those comments, and I've done a lot of analysis on this project, so I do understand totally that the margins for apartment buildings at the moment are very slender. The ability to get a viable project off, it requires pretty solid and robust markets, and even then there's not a lot of difference between construction costs and selling costs in the current environment, construction price and selling price. And if you start to play around with that in any way at all, then I do accept totally the argument that the viability project starts to become very that gives me well sufficient evidence to be able to look at development, the policy DCP 9, and in a couple of aspects. First of all, it gives considerable discretion to be able to make this type of judgment. Specifically, it says and it specifically looks at the profitability of projects and allows this sort of judgment to be made. Secondly, it is a due regard document, so that gives us another level of discretion to be able to make this judgment. I think certainly if we go back to the provisions themselves for provisions of single bedroom and double bedroom and two bedroom housing, those provisions go back to, in Scarborough, certainly way back to the earliest East time. They go back a long way, and they predate the MRA by a fair way. They were specifically put in there as an affordability measure. That is the affordability measure, which is central to the Scarborough developments generally. If the circumstances permit and if the purchases are there, then it is nice to have some social housing in there, but the affordability aspect there is really well and truly covered by the requirements for a large proportion of smaller units. And I think that does the job in this case quite happily. I do accept the evidence that proponent has given that there may not actually be a purchaser of this. If this is well, a social housing provider has to do their own economics, has to provide value for money for their clients. This actually may not provide it. in those circumstances, I think condition 29 and particularly the advice note that goes with it, which is totally inappropriate, to look at who the purchaser might be and what the commercial arrangement might be with that as well. I think they do not belong in this project. So I think we should exclude condition 29.
Thank you. Other speakers on this amendment? Councillor Papard, did you wish to speak to this amendment? Member Page, did you wish to speak to the amendment?
Just very briefly, look, I don't disagree with the comments that have been made by other members. I tend to generally be disinclined to base planning decisions on project feasibility. I don't know that that's necessarily appropriate from a pure planning point of view, but I honestly do feel that there is enough merit from a planning point of view to support this amendment. There was clear nexus between the scale of the previously approved development and the need for the provision of affordable housing as per Development Policy 9. The extent to which the policy has been scaled back, however, makes me question whether or not there is still adequate nexus between the need for provision of affordable housing. This proposed single bedroom units will provide some level of relative affordability. We'd love them to be more affordable, but they do provide relative affordability. So I would just struggle to retain this condition based on the nexus but scale of this current proposal. It doesn't matter how many units there are, in my view. I just, as we said there, we have the discretion to vary this, and I just don't think that it warrants the provision of this affordable housing from a planning point of view.
Thank you. I concur with Member Page. I think she said just about everything I would wish to say too. You know, the developer's not seeking a bonus in this sense. The overruns are not habitable. I think the policy is written in a way that yes, it does say affordable and diverse, but what it's seeking to do is get a mix and some level of diversity that this is providing, I think adequately meets the requirements of the policy, which as a due regard document, I think we can apply our discretion to say, yeah, that meets the requirement and intent of the policy. Affordability is not mandated, and therefore on this and in its own merits, I'm happy to apply that discretion to delete the condition and advice note. That being said, Councillor Migdal as mover for this amendment. Did you wish to close on the amendment, or are you happy just to go to the vote on the amendment?
Happy to go to the vote. Thank you.
Very good. Amendment 2, those in favour of deleting condition 29 and advice note 17. Those against? Where are you heading with that, Councillor Papard? Sorry, you sound off. Are you for or against?
In favour. Sorry, you were too quick. In favour.
That's a unanimous decision. Thank you. Councillor Migdal, did you have any other amendments to the motion to make?
I don't.
Okay.
Thank you,
Did
Chair.
you wish to speak further on that, or are we happy to go to the seconder now?
I think probably the only thing I would add is I understand that the additional floor is discretionary, but I personally feel that we should be looking for additional height in this particular location for future reference. If, this is really where density does belong, and my only concern or consideration is transport. And the ability I can see in this application that there are elements of thought to get people onto bikes and out of cars, but we must take into account that if we are going to create infill, it must be well thought out, and an important piece of that puzzle is transport. And if we could see better transport options from this location where I believe density belongs, we would have much better, much more improved outcomes. But otherwise, I'm considering this application in and of its own merits, and I feel that it's a handsome design, and given the work that the applicant has done with the DRP, they've arrived at the highest and best application today. So I do support it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Papard, you were seconded to the motion on the table. Did you wish to speak to it?
Just briefly, the affordable housing is a policy mechanism intended to, I guess, balance precisely that type of concession, and certainly the single bedroom options address that. And yeah, I support the amendment.
Thank you very much. Other speakers for the substantive motion? Member Page.
Thank you, presiding member. Look, I'm happy to support the recommendation for approval, but before I talk further to the substantive, I'd like to move a further couple of minutes.
Yes, so this would be amendment 3.
I would seek to amend condition 14 and add an associated advice note relating to the section 7.
Okay.
Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
I'll repeat it and I'll expand a little bit. So amendment to condition 14, an addition of an associated advice note, and that condition 14 relates to the requirement for a section 70 notification. And what I would seek to do is to clarify that if a notification is to be placed on the affected title to alert prospective purchasers about potential transport noise, this notification would need to be prepared and lodged by the city with the consent of the applicant.
Thank you. I'm happy to second that. Did you wish to explain anything further?
Yes, just very briefly, and the city did cover it off in the Responsible Authority report. Some time ago, we received some advice that when the staff deals with provisions for section 70 notifications, it is more appropriate for, if the city wants to place that notification on the title of the city, to do that, but the consent of the landowner would be required. The advice note that goes with that change to the condition just makes it clear that there's no obligation to lodge that notice, even if the consent is given, but if they do that the cost needs to be borne by the local government. So the reason I'm moving the condition is to ensure consistency with other section 70 conditions that the staff has been placing on approvals over the last few years.
You, as seconder, I don't need to say anything more. I think it was acknowledged in the Responsible Authority that this was a process that the DAP was going through. I don't think there's any objection from the officers in that regard. Any other speakers on this amendment 3? If not, we
just yeah. Can I ask? Is this consistent with other planning developments within Scarborough or across the state where the local government bears the cost of this?
The DAP has applied this amendment to similar conditions across local governments across the state recently, since that advice was received. So in that respect, it is consistent. Yes. Okay, so let us vote on amendment 3. Those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. Back to you, Member Page, with amendment 4.
Thank you. Amendment 4 is just a minor on-block amendment, conditions 19 and 21. Add the words "to the satisfaction of the City of Stirling" at the end of those conditions.
So
Happy to second that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Migdale. Member Page, did you wish to speak to it?
Very briefly, this just makes it clear that the City of Stirling will decide whether the requirements of met or not. That removes any uncertainty or confusion during clearance of conditions, and in the hopefully unlikely event any future compliance action be required.
Thank you. As seconded, Councillor Migdale, did you wish to speak to that amendment?
Nothing further.
Any other speakers on that amendment? Let's put that to the vote. Those in favour of Amendment 4, that's unanimous. Thank you. Still with you, Member Page.
Thank you. No further amendments from me, presiding member. I'm happy to support the proposal. It provides much needed and appropriately diverse residential accommodation in a desirable location, and which is well serviced by public transport and other services and amenity that will make this a well sought after residential address. The proposal has undergone rigorous assessment by city officers and design review by an independent panel of design experts, and meaningful changes have been made in response to the issues raised, as outlined in the Responsible Authority report. In my view, the proposal aligns well with the built form provisions of the Scarborough Design Guidelines and the relevant local planning policies. The areas of discretion sought relate to height and upper level setbacks. These areas of discretion are minor, with the height exceeding the base height by only just over 2 metres. This variation meets the criteria set out in the design guidelines for building height discretion, and there is no reason not to approve the based on the height proposed. Figure 3 on page 23 of the Responsible Authority report clearly shows how well the buildings will fit in the current context. There will be no adverse impact on the neighbours or surrounding area than there would be if the height of the proposal aligned fully with the base height set out in the guidelines. I note that some concerns were raised during the public consultation process, though it appears the number of submissions received that raised objection to the development were very well balanced by submissions of support for the development, and that is somewhat unusual in many cases. The greatest concern raised in terms of the number of submissions that raised it was an increase in traffic congestion in the area. There were also concerns raised about pedestrian cyclist safety and the amount of parking to be provided on site. However, the traffic impact statement provided with the application concludes that traffic associated with the development can be accommodated within the existing road network without any adverse road safety impacts. The city's traffic engineers have reviewed this traffic impact statement and generally support it, subject to the imposition of related conditions of approval. There is nothing in the report or the technical attachments that suggest to me that this panel should not support the proposal based on traffic-related matters. The city has also provided good justification for supporting the number of parking bays to be provided. There are significantly more bays provided for residents than the minimum number required, and these will more than compensate for the slightly reduced number of visitor bays proposed, especially given the site's location right next to a bus stop and the number of bays and facilities provided to support other modes of transport. Other issues raised relating to noise impacts, visual privacy, dwelling mix and wind tunnelling have either been addressed through design modifications or through recommended conditions of approval. And finally, issues raised about height and loss of use, landscaping, the character of the area, antisocial behaviour and impact on property values have been appropriately addressed by the city in the report. In my view, this is a very well designed development that is respectful to its context and will add vibrancy to this part of Scarborough, so very happy to support.
Thank you, Member Page. Member Syme, did you wish to speak to the substantive motion?
There's very little to add. I think it's important, we've got to a stage now where this can and should be built. It's important that it is built, I think. It's a very nicely designed building. I think I do like the way that the proponent has responded to feedback from the city, from the design review panel and so on, and made appropriate modifications. I think we've landed in a spot now where it's a very nicely crafted development. I do like the twin tower approach. In this case, it gives an ability to provide pretty much all of the apartments with very high degrees of amenity. It makes it a pretty high quality living environment, I think. It's very appropriate for its setting, fits in with the rest of the Scarborough developments extremely well. It should be a very successful development, I think, and I think it's easily worthy of approval.
Thank you. I too am happy to support, and with the amendments that we have in place, I think any discretion that has been sought in terms of height and setbacks is very, very minor. No adverse impacts, not discernible at the street level. And actually they've been made to assist with articulation in a number of cases. And I think all the other technical aspects, waste sustainability, have been met and assessed. The traffic impact statement is supported by the city. Noise is covered by conditions, but also the external regulations. Public art, I think that the development has been well crafted. I think it fits well with the character of Stirling, and therefore I'm very happy to support and concur with the other comments that members have made. That being the case, Councillor Migdell as mover, did you wish to say anything further, or are you happy to go to the vote on the substantive?
I think we've said all we need to say. Let's go to the vote.
Jolly good. Those in favour of the substantive as amended to approve, thank you. That is a unanimous decision. At this point, just going back quickly to my agenda, we've no Form 2 applications for Stirling and no Section 31 reconsiderations. So I'd like to thank Councillor Suzanne Migdale and Councillor Rob Pappard for their attendance as local government DAP members from the City of Stirling and their participation. And thank the applicants for attending. And we'll now move to the next part for the City of Perth. So we'll see you all next.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Are we all back in already? All good. We will recommence the meeting then for the City of Perth at 10:40. For those online who have just joined us, I'll just introduce the panel. My name's Karen Hyde. I'm the presiding member. To my right, I have Dale Page, deputy presiding member. To my left, specialist member John Syme, and further to Mr. Syme's left, Councillor Raj Doshi, and then Councillor Chris Patton, the elected members, local government DAP members from the City of Perth. I'd also like to remind everyone that the meeting is being run in accordance with DAP standing orders, and panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. In welcoming, excuse me, in welcoming Councillor Raj Doshi and Chris Patton and the other members to the panel, panel members need to have considered all documentation contained within Part C of the agenda and Part C related information. Could I please see a show of hands to confirm that? Thank you, that's unanimous. Next, disclosures of interest. Could I please check with our local government members whether this application has been before you at a briefing or a meeting?
No, it has not.
Okay, thank you. Were there any other disclosures that panel members wish to raise? Okay. So we go to our item 3, Form 1 DAP applications for lot 774, number 2, Wellington Street, East Perth, for proposed adaptive reuse of existing state heritage listed buildings and construction of 2 26-storey towers comprising 1,196 student accommodation beds and ground floor commercial tenancies. And we have a group of presenters today who have been given 6 minutes in total. With the panel's indulgence, I think we'll hear from all the presenters and then ask questions afterwards. So we'll commence with Jimmy Thompson from MJA Studio, followed by Chris Dwyer from MJA Studio, Dion White from Hatch, and then Rod Hammersley from ADC. So Jimmy, over to you.
We'll present together.
PowerPoint presentation.
Just like to thank everyone for the opportunity to speak today. On behalf of the client, our client, ADC, we'd love to support the recommendation from the City of Perth for approval of this proposal. We've been engaged since 2021 on this site, securing an approval through DevWA in 22 for a collection of 4 built buildings with mixed use outcomes from residential, built to sell, built to rent, some retail, and the revitalisation of this important heritage asset on the site. Our client, ADC, has been involved much earlier from 2017 with site acquisition, working through with DevWA at the time to work through design guidelines that would control the site and provide for the outcome. More recently, we've been re-engaged to interrogate an alternate use for the southern precinct, being PBSA, or purpose-built student accommodation. This has largely come out from complications with the existing approval over construction costs and escalation that's happened since COVID and whatnot that have caused some issues there. So this is an alternate use that we're really excited for this site in particular. It's a great opportunity of revitalising this precinct, bringing in alternate housing typology into the established and developing East Perth precinct.
And helping to support SEU as well, SEU City.
The big ticket items, I guess, from the current approval, which is still active, versus this revised one before you today, is largely around simplification of the on-site realisation. So we're looking at removing the 3-storey car park basement that was underneath Bronte Street. That's relieving pressure on 12 street trees, and as well as reducing the built form in the forecourt of the heritage building, we're able to retain an additional 29 trees in that zone. We've converted what was a full production brewery down into an F&B kiosk in the forecourt, and removal of that industrial land use, which has also facilitated the reduction in scale of the built form in the forecourt and improved on some of the heritage sight lines. And then I guess that other key element here, which is bringing close to 1,200 beds to the East Perth precinct. When going through this revised design process, we've gone back to the basics for this site here, looking at the A.E. Clare architecture of the existing Perth Girls' School, breaking down the horizontal versus the vertical datums, and then really getting a good understanding and a really rich kind of texture and connection through to the existing heritage building, the patinas on the materials that have built up over many years of use, both as the Girls' School and then later for the WA Police. And then how that language proportion translates through into the revised built form elements for the two towers, the basic colour toning linking through to the existing approval with the lighter tower and the darker tower, but then bringing in the vertical bay divisions and then the vertical datum lines before then holding everything with a really solid frame, linking back to what the A.E. Clare scheme does for the existing school, resulting in the proposal before you today. We've been working really robustly with the City of Perth from pre-lodgement meetings through DRP meetings and subsequent meetings, working through the technicalities and the subtleties of the proposal. Each time it's been an iterative response, resolving concerns about sight lines and really trying to thin back structure to open up views and the public realm, as well as revealing more of that, the state heritage building in the round, which has been a key element for the city. In the forecourt of the building is a really interesting opportunity to open this space up to the public realm. As proposed, 8,500 square metres of publicly accessible space through the precinct of the southern precinct alone, with an estimated construction value of around 8 million, as well as the 5,000 square metres of heritage building that's being restored, rectified, brought up to code, being completely rewired, completely re-air conditioned. All of the existing kind of carbuncles of services have been removed, concrete cants are spared, and that's coming in quite significant, around 20 million. And then just in the far distance there, in the back of that shot, is the small, much more diminutive F&B kiosk for the forecourt. We've been working with and secured Heritage Council endorsement for this reduced scale. It's much more compact than the existing approval. We've brought the height down, brought the widths in, and it's the width of one of the heritage bays. So really trying to be of place. And then I'll hand over to Dion from Hatch just to give a bit of a background and some conditions.
Thank you very much, Chris. Yeah, look, so I think really we're just here today to talk in support of the recommendation for approval. It has been a very thorough process over almost 10 years now, working through guidelines, previous DA, and now to be at this DA, hopefully a third time lucky. But obviously we are now in a position to really get on and deliver the project that has a significant benefit, not just for this site, but now the northern site, which is fairly well advanced within the HAF process as well. But more importantly, I guess that broader East Perth precinct in terms of just that injection of population and life up on the hill there and bring to life obviously the significant status of building. There are two conditions that, as just a point of detail, we really do want to clarify. The public art is the first one. That certainly is part of the legacy policies of DevWA. It is in the current approval, have plans to a series of public art initiatives, so we're not shying away from the importance of public art in the context of particularly that heritage building. All we seek to do, particularly in the current construction environment, is really just to manage that cost. As Chris has outlined, there's a significant quantum of public space and an $8 million investment in upgrade of that space for public access in and around and through the site. We just really seek to ideally cap that public contribution at $500,000 rather than the $800,000 that sits in our sort of take on the calculation method that sits in the policy. We think that's a fairly generous and reasonable contribution in the context of particularly the $8 that's been spent on the public space and the $20 on the wider building. And we're really just seeking for that to be managed, ideally with some clarification around things that contribute to art. Now, is reasonably flexible in that respect, but
so you're at your 6 minutes now, so
really quick. And the last one is just the road. So look, we understand the road policy is there, but it is nearly 20 years old. It was over 20 years old. We are substantially upgrading and maintaining that heritage space, including the heritage wall on the boundary and a number of very significant trees which are now being retained through the the brewery refinements. And we really just want to control and manage that land in perpetuity. At some point, if it is required, we're certainly happy to enter into a legal agreement where that land will be ceded free of cost if there's a demonstrated need, some works that need to occur in that part of the site. But we think it's in everyone's interest for us to continue to control and manage that in the interim.
Okay, thank you. I'll see if the panel members have got questions now. Councillor Doshi, did you have questions of the presenters?
Yes, I do, yes. So thank you for your presentation, and it does look amazing. I've just got a few questions around the information that I've read. So given the previous approval scheme, and that was more so focused around residential, actually coming from the East Perth area and being quite close to this with the community, sort of what planning rationale justifies the change? Obviously, we know that student accommodation is important. That has predominantly been focused around the CBD area, and now it's sort of coming into a neighbourhood like East Perth. What kind of analysis has been done for that changeover?
Yeah, look, I'm happy to hand to Rob, but I think like we did a substantial amount of analysis around where students sit across not just the CBD, but equally there's a number of tertiary institutions in the eastern part of the city, but also it's, I guess, on that line of feed out to particularly Curtin to the southeast as well. So just certainly from Unilodge as the operator's point of view, they really like the location. Part of that is driven by building in the unique combination of the heritage with the student living environment, but a lot of it is also driven by positioning in that part of the city, being able to service the CBD, the direct stuff in the eastern part of the city, and the relationship with Curtin. So it seems to make a lot of sense from that point of view.
Lovely. And touching on the heritage part of it, so how will compliance with the Heritage Council in relation to the girls' school element, sort of how will those conditions be actively monitored and enforced?
Yeah, so that we've been through an extensive process with Heritage Council going right back to the original design guidelines in the previous DA. So there's obviously a number of conditions in there that protect, I guess, the modifications and the long-term management of the building that sit not just in the DA, but also the conservation plan and agreement that sits with that. So we're confident those things can be managed. And certainly from ADC's point of experience dealing with heritage related structures and processes.
Thank you. And you've touched on the sort of the road and the frontage, that sort of just that area neighbouring the vicinity that you're developing on. But in terms of having 196 student beds, would you be able to talk around the modelling and how you've addressed the local traffic movement? So especially with main roads, the new East Perth Primary School sort of possibly in and around the same time. The roads are already struggling sort of down Plain Street at busy times, no right turns during busy hours. So what kind of conversations have already taken place with local traffic movement, public transport also, because it is just I believe it's just the Yellow Cat that goes down that at this current moment, and no Transperth. So we've got a north to south issue with transport already. Have those items been discussed based on the volume of people that will then reside in that vicinity?
Yeah, it's certainly been worked through in quite a bit of detail in the traffic impact assessment that's been done by Flight. So they've done the previous work as well. They're very familiar with agency feedback that's gone into the guidelines originally on the residential scheme and now the student housing. I think we're really comfortable and the operator's comfortable that with the very low levels of car ownership, the students are well served by public transport. They are pretty close to the city. Bronte Street and even the internal Western Lane will have a role with on-demand drop-off and so on. The foyers have been set up to think about how people transition in and out of the site. So we're comfortable that's achievable and won't have an effect on the network from a traffic point of view.
Yeah,
because the parking supply is not there to generate the traffic to start with. So.
And in terms of sort of the community aspect of this second DA as opposed to the first one, I know there was a lot of community engagement that took place with the developer at the time. And there was a lot of talk around, and a lot of the people who live around there wanted some sort of shop. I know that at the time the state government talked about Coles or Woolworths coming, and that kind of fell through. But that has been the imperative thing from around 2017, 2018, from when I've heard about this development and things happening, that was the key thing that everybody sort of wanted. And now there's an F&B kiosk, which may not potentially hit that target for the neighbourhood character. Is that something that you would consider?
Yeah, look, the supermarket's in the second phase of the DA now. So the original DA covered the entire 1.8 hectares. The supermarket is in the northern DA. Whether or not that comes to fruition is to be resolved. But this site always had mainly a largely F&B focus. So had a slightly bigger brewery, production brewery and hospitality venue in the forecourt, which we felt the production element was no longer needed. We felt that was a massive benefit to the, I guess, the visibility of the heritage building, which had been pretty contentious through the first DA. So that element remains, and that'll help activate that forecourt. And then there's food and beverage related tenancies in the east wing. The western wing will be occupied by admin and other amenity over time. So we feel that there's a good balance of activation for the heritage building, given the constraints and sort of getting large floor plates into that.
Yeah, and I've just got some questions very quickly around sort of the gardens and the trees, especially the tall trees that will be facing the public realm and on that area. So great that there's natives in there. That's all fantastic. And the canopy covers the type of trees that you've picked. However, the root systems have always been concerns at the City of Perth. And I live on Adelaide Terrace where this is a constant problem. Then it impacts us as people who own in the strata because we have to then pay for the maintenance. So from that perspective, some of these trees do have those root issues, a few of them that you do have. How will that be maintained? How will that be noted? Because obviously they're all beautiful when they start, and then you get to sort of year 7 onwards, and then you're having to pick up those pieces. And there's a lot of issues along Adelaide Terrace with strata complexes at the moment that are trying to sue the city, I guess, because it's whose responsibility is it? It's in the public realm, but yet it's actually on your property, the issue. So how are you going to possibly address? I mean, it's more preventative as opposed to reactive is what I'm asking.
Yeah, probably twofold. Long-term, I guess, maintenance of the entire site will be seal future entities. So I guess the responsibility for the public space whilst accessible. So I think as far as existing trees are concerned, they typically get assessed by an arborist to look at sort of issues with existing sort of building those trees and to make sure they're trimmed and in good condition and there's not that sort of invasive issue happening. The rest would be mitigation around those trees and species selection for the new trees that are coming in to make sure the placement doesn't result in goods.
Is it possible to ask the panel, is there something where you can put a stipulation in something like this where it's very clearly defined whose responsibility it is?
We can see the city's response to your question in a little while.
Excellent.
Yeah, see how we go with that.
That's all from me.
All right, thank you, Councillor Doshi. Councillor Patton, did you have questions?
Just 2 brief questions. So my understanding there's approximately 8 car bays. Given that it's quite a large complex, and I understand the bays are not allocated for tenants, are you still confident that that's going to be enough bays for services, deliveries, building management? You're confident with the 8 bays is enough given the size of the complex?
Yeah, there's been quite a bit of work going to that. We think between Bronte Street and particularly this western lane that goes down the entire boundary of the site and pops out in Wellington, there's enough circulation space to manage both sort of on-demand vehicles, probably particularly students or visitors into the site, but also delivery trucks for the brewery kiosks and some of the southern end of that western lane.
Yeah,
the student towers have similar areas at the northern end, so operators can bump in and out of those portions of the site. So it's distributed around the site. There's good circulation. There's a reasonable number of bays. There'll be dedicated loading positions. Okay. And they'll particularly be able to service, I guess, the towers, the old school, and the kiosks from various points relative to the operator needs.
And my next question just goes back to the height. So I see you're seeking a variation to go to 26 stories. From my understanding, if that variation is not approved, you're saying the building will be the same height because you will expand the ceiling to floor height of each floor. Is that correct?
Look, I don't think we would expand this floor to ceiling height. It's just with the build to sell scheme that is approved, height at 25 is the same as the height at 26 for the student scheme because they have
all the floors are different between the typologies essentially.
Yeah, okay. And the envelope is the same.
So it's not any higher in absolute terms than the current approval.
Yeah.
But there is an additional level because the floor to floor is slightly lower for
students. Yes, that's what I thought. Yeah, that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions from board members? Member Page.
One briefly, please, and it relates to condition 8 and the amendment that you're 28 and the amendment that you're seeking. When would you expect to prepare and enter into that legal agreement prior to occupation?
I think so, yeah.
That's it. Okay. Member Syme.
No, nothing from me. Yeah.
Oh, okay, I do. So WAPC has just released some guidance in terms of assessing student accommodation, WAPC guidance. Have you had a chance to look at that, and how do you feel that this responds in that respect?
Be completely honest, I have not seen that, so.
I might refer to the city a little bit later on, okay?
So you guys doing what in space?
Yeah, we've referred to the guidance document from
Okay.
WAPC for student housing, and we're I don't want to say largely compliant. I think we are compliant with all the aspirations of that. It doesn't have a lot of specifics in there or metrics, but the objective of the document we certainly align with in terms of distribution of communal space and orientation of rooms and natural daylighting and ventilation. We hit all of those metrics, so we're quite comfortable.
Okay.
Sorry.
I suddenly thought of a question.
Yes, I do have a question. It has to do with the management of the complex overall. And this might be more a matter for the operator than for you, but you're proposing it. And it's in the context of quite a lot of recent feedback research regarding university life, particularly international students, and how there's a diminishing role of the physical campus and the life therein to give the university experience and it seems to me that the responsibility for providing the university experience to students, be they international, really increasingly is going to be on these accommodation locations. So the question is, how does this support that? Because it's a fundamental change to when I went to university, where life was the campus and this was the wonderful time you had. And increasingly, your university experience is here. This has got dimensions which are more local. These are actual national dimensions. This is quite an important aspect to this, it seems to me.
Yeah, it's an important part of, like, I guess all of our projects with student housing is the communal space where you're actually gathering people, and you know, it's an important driver of how you go about the planning of all the zones, how you arrive, where you, and you know, you're trying to create incidental bumping spaces and meeting spaces, as well as quiet working spaces, exercise zones. You know, even where you do your laundry, for instance, you're always trying to get that near active spaces. So it's a huge driver of actually the approach to bringing community together.
Yeah. I think the really important thing too for ADC, and I think part of Uni Lodge's attraction to the site, is it's not just a single use student accommodation complex. The ADC and the manager and owner of the overall site, and effectively the student housing is a tenant of one part of largely the towers, and some of the space at ground level, but there'll be a deliberate separation, I guess, to have an entity which manages the grounds and the energy elements, but also the non-student living housing tenants. So the food and beverage on the eastern side, and particularly the forecourt tenants, are separately managed. But that's a deliberate attempt to make sure that whilst the student housing is absolutely the anchor and life of the site, it's a place where the general public interact and mix as well. So it's not just a solely student experience. So I'm not sure that.
It does sort of, but that sort of goes the other direction in a sense. How much of what we see on the ground floors and first and second floors are student specific, particularly student oriented, and how much of what we see is general public? Now, clearly, if we've got cafes on the street, that's general public, but what else is there? Where does the student experience happen? Is the question.
Yeah, well, certainly there's some generous communal areas within the building itself, and there'll be parts of particularly the western wing. The philosophy has always been to make sure the forecourt and the eastern courtyard all the way through to the site is the really public section of the site, and that's where the external tenancies are in this case. And then the western side will be a quieter sort of zone of the site. There'll probably be a lot more student activity in that western zone. You've got the playing courts and other things that sit within that. So I guess the overall management of the site, public accessibility and those sorts of things will be managed so that we've got an appropriate blend of safety and security for students in certain parts of the ground level, but certainly the forecourt.
And the upper floors and the old buildings. The upper floors are generally student ones, by looking at them.
Yeah. Okay. Couple more questions from me. I think I've seen a lot of these applications recently, similar kind of format. I think we've seen one in Fremantle and a couple more in the CBD. Dion, you mentioned the research that you've done about what this development application will serve, but how confident are you that you've got the right supply and demand mix for this, given how many other projects there are coming forward?
Really comes back to the operator and then signing on, because, you know, these are guys who have got 40,000 rooms across the country. And so they're very tailored in which ones they go after and where the needs analysis requires new student accommodation. And I think, you know, compared to any other built to sell project or anything like that, at this point in time, there is a real need, and the first probably 4 or 5 will get up and get built, and then that will cover demand for a period of time until when others come on. But it's really, if the operator wasn't signed up, then you could question it, but they're serious about it.
I can talk to that as well. I think from the New Lodge perspective, they've got a number in the city as well, in the core CBD, and they see this as an opportunity, given its location outside that core, as offering a different type of experience for students, more campus style offering where the amenities on site as opposed to being immediately around you. And then when it comes down to the dynamics of the economics, they also see it as a affordable option as well, being in the premium locations in the CBD. So all of our modelling around the revenue side of things is being able to provide a discount to that offer. So
okay, thank you for that answer. My last question, and I think Jimmy, you touched on the floor to ceiling height. You've got 2.7 floor to ceiling heights here. So does that adequately take account of all the mechanical stuff that goes on to?
Yeah, so it's 305, and Christian will talk to them.
So on this proposal, we're utilising water-cooled HVAC for the rooms. So it just comes down through the floors in a collection of pipes, and then it gets distributed into each room through the lobby into a bulkhead unit inside. So in terms of the floor to ceilings in that zone, the entry might have a 2400 bulkhead, but then it rises up when you get into the main part of the living space. And as part of our process with the City of Perth, we also tested some alternate floor plans, identifying the ability to retrofit the floor plate in the future if needed into a hotel, short stay, other kind of formats. With the modularisation of the bathrooms on this proposal means that they can be lifted up and shunted around and repositioned as needed, or taken out if we wanted to have less rooms. So there's a level of flexibility built in that means quite a bit of the embodied carbon on site can stay on site.
Right, thank you. That covered the second part of my question about adaptability. You knew that was coming. Okay, any other questions from the presenters? Okay, let's move to the city officers now. And we have Amy Groom and Roberto Guido from the City of Perth. Would you like to make any introductory comments? We've obviously read your RAR and all of that, so we don't need to have that represented to us. But any comments given what you've heard this morning, or straight to questions?
Yeah, we're going to don't want to sort of reinvent the RAR, which Amy did very well on. This, as a city, I guess we're pleased that that is being reactivated. I was personally involved as city representative on the previous scheme, so I was glad to see that work has now progressed. We've had a very good iterative process with the applicants and the project team. That was good. There are a number of variations proposed, as you can see in the RAR, but we consider it as an improvement on the existing approval that's in place. So, we have pushed hard with the applicants to try and align with the applicable policy as much as possible. It was generally supported by the design review panel, which is a good outcome. And whilst there's maybe a little less activation on the street fronts as would for any sort of normal sort of urban environment, campus style lends itself more to that. More activation inside rather than on the peripheral streets. But apart from that, yeah, we're pleased how the project has progressed.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll open for questions. Councillor Doshi.
Thank you, through you, presiding member. Can I just ask some questions around signage? So I know Uni Lodge and a lot of the new uni student accommodations in the CBD have signage, but how will that work in the neighbourhood character scheme for East Perth, especially with residentials being so close?
Yeah, so there will be we've got heritage policy that reverts to signage as well, plus the these individual guidelines that apply to the site, and that's why it hasn't been proposed as part of this application, but it will be subject to a separate application, but we do have a condition and an intent that has to be integrated as far as possible. So we'll see those details later at the building permit stage.
Thank you. And how does this impact the city's parking issues that we already have in that particular vicinity, the pressures on game days and just the lack of parking bays that we are losing very quickly?
Yeah, those considerations. Students ordinarily that will be occupying their spaces don't have a need or don't have the vehicles themselves, and under our scheme there's a maximum provision of car parking. There's no minimums. So and we feel it is well serviced enough by public transport in the area, and local amenities will be available for the students, and the brewery has that access available. But without that imperative or that mandate that we could ask for car parking, we have to accept their findings.
And how is the city comfortable with the urbanisation, the tree canopy plan that we have in place? Does this DA sort of work? Does it complement that?
Yes, there is a high level of retention, but also they're adding to it. Pretty much a flaw of the previous scheme was Bronte Street was going to be obliterated in terms of trees. This is no longer part of the deal, so that's good. So that's keeping all those trees along that aspect there. But overall, our parks team are pleased with it.
Can I ask, in terms of engagement with the neighbourhood, I noticed on here there was 3 submissions. How is that engagement taking place?
Yeah, so as per the DAP guideline, as per our planning framework, we have to advertise within a certain radius. Those that are affected by the proposal could potentially be affected. The letters went out for 21 days from memory.
28.
Yes, 28 days. It was on the city's website, and that's all the. I know as probably a lot more interest in the previous schemes that included that north site as well. But this time, that's all we received.
My very last question is going back to the root system issues that we have very much so in the city of Perth. How can we address that so that there is a clear direction on who's responsible before the issue arises?
So I've got a final landscaping condition in the recommendation. So we could potentially look at probably adding an advice note just outlining those issues, and so the applicant is more cognizant of it, and our parks team can review it at the time of seeing the final plan.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patton.
Yeah, just one question. Given that the site is a reasonably high elevation on top of the hill, does the city have any concerns with how the elevation of this development will tie into its surroundings?
Bronte Street has had quite a bit of elevation. I know number 35 down the street is also pretty much at that height as well. Just the nature of a growing city, I guess, and the guidelines allow for that height. It was sort of heavily tested with a 3D model at the time of coming up with the guidelines in consultation with the Development WA, and we looked at it sort of in its context and all this sort of open space around it. It was considered that was like an acceptable sort of height for the area.
Okay, sure, thank you.
Other questions, Member Page?
Yes, please. I have a few. They largely relate to some of the conditions. I'm keen to get your comments on the applicant's request to amend conditions 23 and 28, and specifically in relation to public art. I'm keen to understand whether or not you have an intent to equalise or extend the requirement for public art across the city generally under the new scheme and associated policies. And then in terms of the local law, I'm keen to get your views on whether you think that the intent of the local law will still be met through a legal agreement as an option suggested by the applicant.
No problem. So I'll refer to the public art query first. So yes, it's not a typical requirement in the city, but we have adopted as part of the normalisation process from the Development WA their policy in its entirety. And it was a condition on the previous approval as well, so it shouldn't be too much of a surprise. In terms of a wider application of it, I don't believe it is part of the local planning scheme 3 to sort of go wider, but it is a clear policy requirement that we have to have the framework there that has to be enforced. It was part of the previous approval, so we're comfortable that we can administer it in accordance with the policy.
And then in terms of the local law, the subject of condition 28, instead of ceding the land now, the applicant's proposing a legal agreement now to cede it when it's required. Do you think that still satisfies the intent of the local law?
Potentially, the only thing, there's a habit of legal agreements getting lost, I think, so for some reason. We operate in we try to be consistent. So this is the final piece of the puzzle. All the properties on the west of the site have gone through the same seeding process. And it doesn't mean at the time of occupation we're going to take the land off them. It's just that we have spoken to our transport and urban design team, and it's not necessarily that Wellington Street will be widened. The footpath might be improved because all the activity that's happening on the east of the site with the Wacko redevelopment, the East Perth Primary School. So it is that sort of final piece of the puzzle that's required, and the seeding process is what we have done in the past, and we are more comfortable with that.
Okay, and then, so there are several conditions you're recommending that require action to be taken prior to applying for a building permit. Now, if those requirements aren't met before the applicant applies for a building permit, can you refuse to accept a building application? Or if they submit the application, assuming it's a certified, would you then accept it and place it on hold while you sort out?
I'd say it is kind of unique to the city in terms of our wording in the condition. It's just more to give the applicant team and the project team the heads up that it will be required at building permit station. So not necessarily that we expect a pre-permit clearance application to be submitted prior, but it's just it'll be to their benefit if they do sort of tackle these things on a sequential basis, and that building permit just makes it a lot easier.
So you're not going to refuse to accept the bill, because I'm not sure you can.
No.
Building
That's not our process.
boxes aren't ticked, you'll deal with them through the building permit.
Correct. Yeah, at that stage, yeah.
Right. Then condition 11 requires damage to, where it's worded, it requires damage to significant fabric being made good. Can we assume that this refers to damage that occurs during construction, or does it also include damage that has already occurred to original fabric?
It is intended for during construction, where so like a safeguarding case, and in case something untoward happens, there is that safeguard in place. Yeah.
Then condition 12 is currently worded to require the original drinking trough and joinery elements to be retained prior to applying for a building permit. Again, I assume you want these retained in perpetuity. So the action that you require in this regard is that you want to see amended plans that show retention of those features before you receive a building application, or do you just want the building plans to include that detail?
Yes, we did get this from Heritage Council, and it would be the intent that we had those details at the building permit stages to demonstrate compliance.
Okay. Then condition 13 requires a final ESD strategy at working drawing stage, and some people interpret working drawing stage as different things. When you reference working drawing stage, do you mean you need the final strategy as part of the building application documentation?
Yeah, that's probably lifted straight from the WA approval, but yes, that was our intent at the building permit stage.
And then condition 16 requires verification that the development shown on the final construction plans can achieve compliance with the noise regs. Some other local governments add an extra condition that requires certification that the application does comply once it's occupied, say within 3 months or so. Do you think that's necessary, or are you comfortable that the development shown on the final construction plans is enough to give you that comfort?
Yeah, our community health team was happy with what provided, so, noting it's always a preliminary report, and then at the final certification stage, if it was, because it's a noise receiver, I guess they were more comfortable. If it's a noise emitter, then we'd probably ask for that that additional step.
Okay. We're nearly there. Condition 19 requires a student accommodation plan, and you've stipulated in that condition some of the things that you would like that plan to include. No, not included that as an advice note, you've embedded that in the condition. One of the things that confuses me a little is you've included a need to include the relevant experience of the proprietor operator in that plan. What is the planning basis for it?
Our planning policy 3.9 refers to that requirement, just to They're not sure of the origin of it, but I think just to show that it is an experienced operator, because there might have been instances in the past where it has been managed according to what we would expect.
And if it isn't, from a planning point of view, how do you deal with that?
Good question. Yeah, they'll have to prove it in that other aspects of the plan or of the management plan are tight enough to sort of overcome that.
Okay, and then lastly, advice note 2 states that any substantive changes to the approved plans will need to be made via Form 2 process. What if the changes are so substantive that they don't fall in the scope of a Form 2? Could that advice note then create some confusion?
It is more of a like heads up that if they're minor, it's Form 2, then it'll be as we have experienced in the past. If they're sort of incremental changes, then it will be a Form 1. That can be reworded.
Those are my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you. I've just got a couple of questions. The WAPC guidance the applicant has had a review of and feels that they're in keeping with that, the guidance statement. Did you have a chance to look at that during the assessment of this?
Not during the assessment, but as a city, we're one of the main sort of contributors as part of that WAPC process. We're involved in the workshops and yeah.
Okay, thank you. And the design guidelines state that design excellence should be pursued for this site as an objective. To what degree are you satisfied that that objective has been met, or was the DRP satisfied?
Yeah, so we don't have a definition of that. So that's in our planning framework, apart from whether it gets a support of the design review panel, which there were. There's more support. There were some requests for improvements, which we feel the applicant team has worked hard to achieve. So overall, we thought the objective was met. We expect everything to be excellent in the city, but in this case.
Okay, thank you. That's all from me. If there are no other questions, oh yes, Mr. Simon.
Sorry, yeah, just a couple of quick ones. I've just got a bit distracted on the public art. Are you happy that it should be capped, or would you prefer it to be open?
Prefer it to be as per the policy wording, because just in terms of consistency purposes. Yeah.
For consistency, do you think it's appropriate to cap it or to put a number on it? Or
Rather, yeah, we're not.
I mean, how begs the question: if you haven't got a process in place, how do you pick a number? How do you get a number?
Yeah.
So the numbers actually derived from the policy. It does have a breakdown of what value the development is. So I think all into this
policy,
so it's implied,
provides a way of going to a number which gets applied at approval, say, building application.
So it's the design guidelines. It's broken down into the construction cost. So it's up to 2 million, 2 million to 50 million, and then the 50.
It's applied at what stage is the question?
Would be as per what's put on the development application form, the total cost of the development. Okay. Reassess it. No. Yeah.
So the number we already have.
Time of application. Yeah.
Okay. The second is a general sort of urban design question, I guess. And the question is I think I know the answer, and I think you're sort of locked in by the existing development, but this is probably these will be one of the most prominent buildings in the city. It is the highest building by a long way on the highest point of the city, apart from Kings Park. It mirrors to some extent the building form, which is south towards Terrace Drive and so on, but it is considerably higher than what's on the other side of the hill around Placebrook Cove, for example, which caps out at around about 9 stories. So to what extent was that aspect of urban design taken into account, and did you have any influence on it anyway?
Yeah, the city was involved in design guidelines, which Deborah Everywhere did come up with back in 2018 or 19, whenever that was. And at that stage, that was the infancy of the local planning strategy, which the city's local planning strategy, which expects East Perth to do a lot of heavy lifting in terms of residential sort of uplift. And that's why, as part of LPS 3, the heights and the intensity of that area just in general will be lifted. So this might be an oasis in terms of it looks out of place at the moment or when it's built, but over time, the scale and form of other sort of sites in the area will also increase.
Okay.
It will still be prominent for a long.
Yes, yes. Sound.
It sort of needs the other site to be built, otherwise it's going to be standing. Anyway.
If we're done with questions, let's move ahead. And we've got responsible authority report that recommends we approve this subject to conditions and advice notes. So I'm seeking a mover for that, please, in the first instance. Is there a mover? Member Page moves. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Patton. Member Page, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, please. Happy to support the recommendation for approval. Again, before I talk further to the substantive.
Okay, can you take those one at a time unless they're easy on block?
One at a time.
Okay.
The first, they are minor, but one at a time will be better. Minor amendment to condition 11. To clarify that this condition refers to damage during construction and not existing.
Okay, moved by Member Page, seconded by Member Syme.
Would you like me to read the condition?
Yes, please.
The condition will then read, any damage to significant fabric during construction being made good in profile and materials to match the original existing to the satisfaction of the city in consultation with DPLH.
Thank you. Did you wish to speak to it?
Oh, look, it's just at the moment, it's not clear whether the current wording refers to damage that has already occurred or that could occur. So this is just to clarify.
Okay, seconded. Did you wish to say anything?
Exactly that. It just needs clarification.
Okay. Any other speakers on Amendment 1? Let's put that to the vote. Those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. Still with you, Member Page.
Thank you. And then a minor amendment to condition 19 to remove reference experience of the proprietor operator in the student accommodation management.
Second.
As mentioned before, this may well be provided by the applicant. I just question the planning basis. I understand it's captured in a policy, but I'm play through in my mind what would happen if the plan came through and it didn't include the relevant experience, or if they didn't have the experience. I doubt that would be enough to bring this whole project to a halt. So I just question its inclusion.
I concur with that. Any of the speakers on Amendment 2? Let's put Amendment 2 to the vote. Those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. Amendment 3.
Thank you. I would like to amend condition 28 to require a legal agreement to cede the land when it is required for road widening purposes rather than ceding it ahead of occupation.
Is that drawing upon the applicant's words, or do you have?
I have some wording.
Okay.
The amended condition will then read, because the applicant's words didn't contain that trigger, the amended condition would then read, prior to occupation, the applicant shall enter into a legal agreement with the city of Perth to cede potential and.
Okay, right. Thank you. That's moved by Member Page. So that's 2, seconded by Member Syme. Did you wish to speak further?
Yes, thank you. Look, in reviewing this relevant or this particular local law, the stated effect of the local law is to provide new building lines in various streets within the city to facilitate the development of various streets into high quality pedestrian and vehicular thoroughfares. There is no development proposed within that area to be set aside for road widening, and any future proposal to develop within this area would require a development application if the applicant sought to develop within it. If the city wished to widen the road or wished to put infrastructure within this area, that would be the trigger for that ceding to occur. So I'm happy that the amended wording suggested by the applicant and added to briefly with the words prior to occupation by myself would still achieve the intent of the city's local law.
Thank you. Member Syme is seconded. Did you wish to comment?
Yes, briefly. I think that if we're looking at this practically, I do accept that it is much better in the long term or for the applicant, for the proprietor to actually manage this entire environment. The way that the landform goes and where the retaining walls are mean that any sensible pushback from that doesn't make any sense. That's a little bit different than the properties down the hill in Wellington Street where they're much more at grade. This has got a very substantial retaining wall before you get up to the general level. So playing around with that in any meaningful form doesn't make any sense unless you take the whole lot. Frankly, I think it's even though that particular footpath there is fairly narrow, it's wide enough. I don't think the city's ever going to, in a case where it's going to actually be one many. So unless the city actually gets to the stage where it actually wants to do a substantial project in there, I think the likelihood of this being activated is vanishingly small, practically. However, if this were the case, this amendment would still give the city the ability to take that land if and when that's required. My view is it's probably unlikely anyway.
Okay, thank you. Other speakers? Go to the vote. Those in favour of Amendment 3? It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I would seek to amend Advice Note 2, please, to include reference to a new development application. The second paragraph of Advice Note 2 would then read, any substantive changes to the approved plans will need to be made via a new development application or via a Form 2 process, depending on the scope and extent of changes.
Okay, thank you to Advice Note 2. The extra words, I'm happy to second that. Thank you. Did you wish to say anything?
As I mentioned before, the possible changes could be so significant as to warrant a new development application, and then there could be some confusion given the current advice.
Thank you. Seconder, I'll just briefly speak. We have seen some confusion over these things, so I think it's good to have that clarity so that we know which side of the line amendments fall upon. Any other speakers on Amendment 4? Let's go to vote. Those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll revert to the substantive.
Wish to do anything with conditions 12, 13?
No. Okay. All good. Okay. The city responded to my question.
Okay.
Speaking to the substantive, I am very happy to support this proposal on this landmark site. This end of the city will benefit greatly from this development, both economically and from a place activation perspective. Pleased to see the inclusion of educational related use in the former student accommodation, and I agree with the sentiments of the city's design review panel that this inclusion maintains strong connection with the past use of the precinct as a place of education. Also very pleased to see retention of the creative industries components and the amenities that will benefit not only the residents on site, but also those who live and work in the surrounding area. I note that 3 objections were received during consultation and that the concerns focused mainly on the height of the towers, the adequacy of car parking, noise and smell, and the need for certain uses, given the prevalence of other such uses in the area. The issues of noise and smell are appropriately dealt with via separate legislation and recommended conditions of approval. And whether there is a need or not for certain uses is not a consideration that this panel could reasonably take into consideration in making our decision on the proposal. The proposal is compliant in relation to parking provisions. Unlike other local government areas, this area of the city is subject to the provisions of the Perth parking policy and consequent upper limits on parking provision. In relation to height, there's a minor variation sought through the design guidelines, and it's important to note that whilst there's an extra story proposed, the overall height is consistent with the height that has already been approved for this site. The additional height will have no negative impact on the heritage value of the place, and nor will it unduly impact neighbours or the landscape. Instead, as the city has commented on when we asked them the question, it actually aligns well with the intended form and scale for this precinct under both existing design guidelines as well as the intended vision for this precinct as set out in the city's local planning strategy and draft planning scheme number 3. The only other variation sought to the provisions of the guidelines are a minor site setback variation for a transformer and even more minor variation to the Eastern Tower heritage setback and tower floor plate size. In my view, this is an unusually compliant proposal, particularly given the scale and complexity of this development. So the designers do need to be recognised for that. It's been subject to extensive design review and generally supported by the city's design review panel. Amendments were made to the design to respond to most key suggestions made by the panel, and where changes were not made in response to feedback, I think this has been appropriately justified by the applicant and by the city's officers in the report. I think this is an excellent, well-considered design that works well and responds well to the original heritage fabric and value of the place. It's going to be a bit of a game changer for this end of the city, so very happy to support.
Thank you, Member Page. Councillor Patton is seconded. Did you wish to speak to the substantive?
Look, just briefly, I think, in my personal opinion, I feel that the building is too tall for the area. However, I also understand as a growing city that we do need to build up. And I'm also a big supporter of dense living because it helps economy, small businesses. So after going through the report and speaking with everyone here, I'm happy to support the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Doshi, did you wish to speak to the substantive? Thank you, Member Syme.
Yes, look, a couple of things. One concern, I do share the height concern on this, but I think if it was more consistent with the built form, which is on the north side, which is around Closebrook Cove, something around about 12, 15 stories would have been more instantly compatible with the general environment and will be for quite some time. However, I understand how it got to this stage, and I think we're not in a position to actually change that. It comes from a different sort of process, as it were. It might mean, from the city's point of view, to look very carefully about what future stuff goes on further down the hill, particularly towards the Closebrook Cove area. I think going on the other side, there's much more leeway because of what's there. So to the extent that this sets a pinnacle, as it were, it's important from a general urban design point of view for the city to take account of, I think. I think as a project in itself, it's a particularly good one. It picks up and preserves almost all of a actually fairly difficult heritage building to do something with. If you sort of say, well, what can we do with this in a sense which makes any sense as a development form, then this is one of the few approaches which actually start to make some sense. And I think the way that's been approached is a very good one. I do particularly like, and the way that the heritage building is being incorporated very skillfully into the overall project, I think is excellent. I do particularly like the land use and going back to my earlier comments, the extent to which it allows to capture on-site an experience for people who are transitory or there for a year or two, but need some life, some activation. So the ability to continually create and recreate a local community, which is what the task of this building is actually a very important one. And I think from a student accommodation point of view, this sort of stands out because this does that. I don't think every other student accommodation project does that, but this really does that. And that's impressive, I think. I think from a general architectural point of view, it's done skillfully. I think will be an interesting addition to the environment. I think that this particular part of East Perth is an important one because it is a halfway point between some existing centres of activity. That is one in Closebrook Cove and the second one down towards Terrace Drive and Adelaide Terrace. And to the extent to which this can create a link between those two, then it becomes quite useful. So that linking and that working of activity up and down Plain Street, as this one is a link in the chain, is a very useful one, I think, one which doesn't exist now. So there's an awful lot to like about this development. I think it's been executed in a particularly skillful way, and I think it's a very worth.
Thank you. I'll just briefly speak to the substantive. I'm very comfortable with supporting it. there is a very long history to this site, and this proposal or elements of it, and an awful lot of work has gone on in terms of dealing with heritage and certainly bringing the community along through the engagement processes. And I think that has provided a very good foundation. And certainly much of that work has informed the development of the design guidelines. And I think it's been a collaborative process along the way. So I think it's in some ways not surprising that it's relatively compliant. In fact, and I am familiar with the development over time, in my opinion, I think this has some improvements. I actually think it deals with the heritage fabric more sensitively, and I think it contributes to the streetscape more strongly in that sense. Even though there's a change of use, I think it actually reflects lived experience of that area far more now than perhaps it did in the early years. So I'm very happy with those improvements. I do support urban living for students. I had that experience myself in Edinburgh, which was wonderful, and members of my family have used Uni Lodge over in Melbourne on occasion, so I'm familiar with their management. So I think that combination will work very well with students, almost the best of both worlds in terms of campus and town living. The variations to the building height, and the setbacks and the tower floor plate, that they're very, very minor. And I don't think in terms of looking at the provisions of the planning scheme they have, or the deemed provisions, they have any major impact. I think the RAR went through that very well. Difficult situation with design review panels, because you had two different sets of design review processes. And I agree with Member Simon, it's not at this point that we start to introduce new rules, but I think you have satisfied the current round of design review comments adequately. And I think those further improvements to the facade and the streetscape appearance are working well. So in that respect, I'm concurring with what every other member has said and happy to support. I'll refer back to Member Page now to close debate. Then we shall vote on the substantive as amended. All votes in favour. That's a unanimous decision. Briefly, with our agenda, we have no applications, section 31 reconsiderations. Anything before that are listed on the charge application report on the website. So at this point, I'd like to thank Councillors Duffy for attending and participating, panel members, presenters and city staff. Room together and close the meeting at you.
Thanks, everyone.